showing your love and support and getting to honor Scott today. It's a good way to do that by being present with the family. A lot of you got to be a part of the pain of the workout this morning. Those will be the ones that take a little bit more time standing up after we're done. Okay? Let me pray and we'll get started. Jesus, we thank you for today, this moment where we get to come and remember and be thankful for a life created and a life lived well. We pray that your name would be lifted up, and we pray that Scott would be honored, we would remember well the great man, husband, father, and friend that Scott was. We pray this in the name of Jesus. Amen. A couple quotes. A guy named Dave Tate on a podcast. I'll go ahead and start this with a quote from Barbell Shrugged. It's a CrossFit podcast. Is this: if you avoid adversity, you're going to live a life of mediocrity. Satchel Paige, a famous baseball player, says this: never let your head hang down. Never give up and sit down and grieve. Find another way. And this: fear less, trust more, take less, give more, whine less, think more, talk less, say more, hate less, love more. As I read these, they have Scott's name written all over them. From the very first moments of talking with him, I hear those things just ring out. And so we come to remember that. We come to celebrate that. And a life that was hard fought to the end. A life that was full of passion and hard work and love for those around him. Scott Alexander Serene, born July 27th, 1972. Passed away peacefully at home on August 4th, 2015, in the arms of his loving wife. He was born in Stratford, New Jersey. Scott had the most extraordinary passion for life that was evident to everyone who met him. The only child of his caring parents, Scott went on to marry the beautiful love of his life, Tracy Moore, on April 15th, 2000. Together they had 4 amazing children who bear the likeness of their beloved daddy, both physically and in spirit. Scott fondly referred to Carson, Kane, Carly, and Camlin as the 4 C's, and doted on them in the most magical way. To know Scott was to know how deeply a man can adore his children and wife. There's nothing Scott loved more than to be with Tracy. His devotion to her shone brighter than the stars. Scott also enjoyed CrossFit, being active with his children and watching the sun set in the evenings with his bride at his side. Scott's wit, his humor, and dashing good looks brought great joy to his friends around the country and online where he connected with others. But it was his indestructible attitude and determination that made the biggest impact on those he met. Scott accomplished so much in his 43 years. Among so many other things, he fulfilled his dream to start kettlebells for brain cells, raising money for the American Brain Tumor Association. And in lieu of flowers, Scott would desire that those donations would go towards ABTA. Scott was survived by his wife Tracy, their children Carson, Kane, Carly, and Camlin, and his parents, on whose support he always leaned, Betty and Jan Serene.
When I wake up, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who wakes up next to you. And when I go out, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who goes along with you. And when I come home, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who's coming home to you. And when I'm dreaming, well, I know I'm gonna dream about the time when I'm with you. But I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles, to fall down at your door. When I'm working, yeah, I know I'm gonna be the man who's working hard for you. And when the money comes in for the work I do, I'll pass along every cent of it to you. And when I'm lonely, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who's lonely without you. And if I grow old, well, I know I'm gonna be the man who's growing old with you. But I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles, to fall down at your door. But I would walk 500 miles, and I would walk 500 more, just to be the man who walked 1,000 miles, to fall down at your door. When I wake up, well, I hope I'm gonna be the man who's waking up to you. And when I'm dreaming, well, I know I'm gonna dream about the time I had with you.
First, I'd like to thank the Serene family for giving me this opportunity. It's obviously a huge honor to talk about Scott. Excuse me. I remember the first class that I coached at the gym with Scott. I'd been told about his condition, so as a coach, I was obviously aware of things I needed to watch out for. But that day showed me more than what I had anticipated. I was shown who Scott really was. And it became apparent that he was He's a man of many gifts. His first gift that I noticed was he was incapable of giving up. He never did. Every time he came to the gym, he gave 100%. Anyone who knows him knows that he was that type of man. In and out of the gym, just didn't give up. His next gift was his ability to make you feel like the most important, like the most important person in the room. Every time I was around him, he made me feel encouraged, trusted, loved. I've never met someone like that. His last gift was grace. Throughout all his trials, throughout everything that was thrown his way, be it in the gym or in life, he faced it with a smile on his face and a sense of humor that was unmatched. Always having a joke on hand, never showing in his actions how bad the situation might be. Usually when someone passes from these circumstances, others will say they lost the battle with cancer. But we all know that Scott did everything but lose. He won through the way he lived his life, helping others, loving others, making them laugh. He was a friend. He was the one who was always there and who will continue to be there, surviving through the lessons he taught us, through the faces of his family, through a better than dying t-shirt or through something as small as a Team Scout bracelet. Every day he's there, and every day he's missed. Thank you.
So I kind of want to explain a little bit about, most of you guys actually don't know who I am. Scott and I became pretty good friends about 3 years ago when he showed up at our CrossFit box in Billerica, Georgia at 5 a.m. It takes a special kind of crazy person to show up at 5 a.m. And you know, looking at Scott, he's that kind of crazy. We hit it off right away. We weren't the kind of friends that would ask each other for advice. We were the kind of friends that would kind of rib each other all the time. And I'd make fun of him for shaving his legs, and he'd make fun of me because I'm a fur monster. He coined one of my nicknames, the Hairy Motivator, because I was always cheering him on. But one of the things, there's two stories I want to tell about Scott that really touched me. The first one is right after he passed out at work, and they found out he had his first tumor. I'd never met Tracy before. Scott and I were just friends at the gym. We text a lot, we talk on the phone. But first time I met Tracy was in the hospital. And I'm sitting there, and Scott's passed out. He just had if you haven't seen the pictures, he called them staple heads. Awesome looking scar he had. And I'll try not to curse too much in church, but Scott would appreciate that. But he's laying there, and Tracy got called out by the doctor to look at something. And it's just me and Scott in the room. And I grabbed his hand and I looked at him and I said, Scott, you get done with this, that scar's gonna look so badass. And honestly, he smiled. He was out, but he smiled. And I was like, you know what? He's still in there. I don't care. This isn't gonna knock him out. That's when, like Jerry said, it takes more than this didn't defeat him. And I knew then he's going to beat it, and to this day I say he did. The second story I want to tell is an advice story. It was not given to me, it was honestly given to himself. We're at the gym at 5 a.m. and goofing off like we always did and trying to see how high we can jump up on boxes. And there's a video of this online. If you guys want to see it, let me know. I'm doing a real tall box jump in the background. For 20 seconds at least, Scott's not moving and his head's planted flat on this box. And all I remember saying was one of the funniest things I've ever heard from him. He stands up and he goes, "Scott, stop pussyfooting around and jump already." And I couldn't, I almost lost it. If I'm talking word, I'm dying laughing. But it stuck with me, what he said. He eventually did make the jump. I don't think he went any higher than what he did at that time, but that stuck with me. And I spoke to him about it after he woke up from the surgery. And it's the advice that I would give all you guys, and I think you would as well. And that's stop pussyfooting around and jump already. Scott wasn't going to do that. He wasn't going to pussyfoot around and wait on something. No, he acted. And I think that's what he would want us to do as well. That it sucks that we're up here. It really does. But I think Scott would be humbled that we're doing this, but he would want us to celebrate. And for that, that's why I'm here. I'm here to celebrate Scott. Thanks.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Eric Lopez. First, I'd like to thank the Serene family for allowing me to speak today. It's an incredible honor. As you was a Serene, Tracy, and kids, thank you. I've had the distinct pleasure of meeting Scott twice in my life. Most of you are going to ask yourself, how is that possible? How could he meet Scott twice? I'll tell you why. First time I met Scott was roughly 1997 when we worked at Coastal Telephone together. There's a lot of guys from Coastal I see here today. And we were just young punk kids without any worries except making sure we paid rent on time and trying to meet girls. We quickly became great friends. We shared a common competitive desire to beat the crap out of each other when it came to basketball. Usually his desire was greater than mine. He was a phenomenal basketball player. But in the end, we always walked away friends and with a greater appreciation for each other. That's when I realized that Scott was showing me what real determination is. Now, we also had some times where we would just hang out and talk about what it is that we wanted for the future. For all the conversations we had, there was one constant with him. To find a wife and have many, many children. Not long after we celebrated my 21st birthday here in San Antonio, he made the infamous trip to Panama City Beach, Florida, where he met her. I remember talking with him and knowing that something was different about the girl that he had just met. The more I talked with him, the more I knew that she was the one for him. Soon after, I was given the honor of being in their wedding. As I stood back and watched the unconditional love and admiration he had and showed to Tracy, it made me realize what true love was supposed to look like. Now, Tracy and Scott, they would end up moving to Georgia, and at that time, the conversations he and I shared became fewer and fewer. But the one constant I knew to be true was that he was going to love Tracy forever. That's when he showed me what dedication was all about. The second time I had the pleasure of meeting Scott was when he, Tracy, and the kids moved back to Texas. He was a completely different man. The guy I knew from 16 years ago was gone, and there was somebody new in his place. But that man was a better man. He liked the Atlanta Falcons, for Christ's sakes. Atlanta Falcons. Must have been crazy. But other than his takes in football teams, he was a man who was content with the life he had chosen and the family that they had created. He was much more relaxed and happy despite having cancer. The entire time he fought cancer, the entire time that he fought, never once did I ever hear him say, "Why me? Why now? Why couldn't it be someone else?" Even when we had our one-on-one private conversations, never once did it come up. His outlook toward life and his fight was truly astounding. If you were to ask him, he'd say that Tracy was the astounding one, with all the strength and all the courage. I would say you both were. Another change in Scott was his newfound passion for CrossFit. What used to be basketball was now all CrossFit all the time. Morning till night, CrossFit. During radiation treatments in Houston, when he was there for 5 to 6 weeks, his dedication to CrossFit continued. Through other CrossFit fanatics and his nurse, he received a rowing machine for his personal use at home while undergoing the treatments. And that's just crazy. He got a rowing machine delivered to his house so that he could continue with CrossFit. Unbelievable. He made so many friends in the CrossFit community, not only in Georgia, but here in Texas as well. I know you all got to see that dedication and determination that I spoke of earlier. I'm sure you also had the pleasure of admiring those smooth legs with his impressive socks collection. I see a lot of those socks out here today. Scott never did anything half-assed. He was always all in. Another positive change in Scott was that he now had 4 beautiful children. Tracy, it's pretty obvious what you and Scott were doing if he wasn't at work or at CrossFit. Carson, Kane, Carly, and Cameron. Your daddy loved you guys. I am so glad that you were able to spend so much quality time with him before he went to heaven. So when you feel sad or you have doubts, I want you to remember all the special times that you had with him, and always believe that he'll be in your hearts forever. Your dad lived each day for you and your mom. That's the unconditional love that he had for you. So I have a challenge. I have a challenge for all of you here and all of you watching at home. And that challenge is to be that person. Be the person who exemplifies what determination and dedication looks like and what unconditional love feels like. Not only for your spouse or for your children, but for your family, your neighbors, even your CrossFit buddies. Just be that person. Scott was that person. He was that person for his friends and his family. Scott was that person for me. Thank you.
Scott was my friend. I'm a pretty shy person and can seem standoffish at times. It can take people a while to get to know me, I think. Not for Scott. Day one, Scott was my friend. I got to spend a lot of time with Scott almost every single day, 5 days a week. And I got to know Scott really well. And I hope he got to know me really well. I could tell you how strong he was, how courageous he was, how committed he was. How amazingly genuine of a person that he was. What you saw in Scott is exactly what you got. Always. Always. Most of you already know all that. What I want to take this honored time to say is what genuinely amazed me about Scott and continues to amaze me about Scott. The way that he loved was very, very special. He would talk about Tracy. And his love for Tracy so deeply that it amazed me. It inspired me. His children, every single one of you, he was so proud of. So proud of. He knew you so well. And he would tell me often about each one of you and the qualities that you had and how proud he was of you all individually. He loved you so much. A love that I think most of us probably will search for our whole lives. And I want and I pray that you guys will always know that and remember that every day for the rest of your life. He was proud of you and he loves you so much. Thank you for giving me the honor to say those words.
Hi everyone. I'm very tall. So tall. My name is Nora, and I am one of those internet people that you were talking about. So I'm kind of unique because I'm tall, and also because I never actually got to meet Scott, like in the traditional way where you meet someone and you're like, shake hands and breathe the same air. But I still had the honor of knowing Scott. It was so wonderful. Scott and I met on the internet, but not in a weird way. It's also how I met Tracy. And we met because my husband had the same kind of tumor that Scott had, which is a really grim and terrifying and isolating diagnosis. But knowing Scott and Tracy helped make it less terrifying and less isolating. So I knew Scott and even Tracy this morning. I got hunger, really only through screens. And he and Tracy had this magical ability of showing up like on my phone or on my computer screen like the moment that I needed them, like magic. And even though, feelings. Even though his life was winding down, he always wanted to know how I was, and not just I'm fine, but the real version. He always wanted to listen. Even on Saturday, when I knew that his health was failing and rapidly, he had the time to get in touch with me and ask me how I was doing, because he was incredible. And it turns out a lot of people feel this way about Scott. It's pretty obvious this morning when there were so many people doing so many really hard things in a gym. This thing is actually holding me up. And that all of you are here and that all of these people are watching as well. I was telling his mother, he was like the Kevin Bacon of the internet. Like every time I post about Scott, people are commenting like, I know Scott, I like Scott. I'm like, we all like Scott, it's so great. It was really hard not to like Scott. And Scott, and people have brought this up, every single person who's spoken, he was a really strong guy, and not just in the CrossFit sense, although I couldn't complete the part of the workout that he did with one arm for his last workout. I was literally last. Like, that's how strong he was. But not just in the CrossFit sense, but just in every sense. And I think that anybody who did the workout this morning or who has gone through anything in life knows that in order for you to get stronger, things have to get harder. And that sounds like a CrossFit phrase, but it is also true. It's the hard things in life that do make us stronger. And Scott did really hard things, and he made them look easy. And he took these things, these hard things, and he used them to build strength, and not just for himself, but for the world and for everybody who had the honor of knowing him, either in real life or just through the internet. He raised some really strong, amazing children. He was married to a strong, amazing woman, and he came from strong, amazing parents, and he adored you all. He knew that brain cancer is really underfunded, and so he took it upon himself to change that, to do something for other people who would eventually need that and need that strength. He made other people around him strong, even when those were people that he would never meet. The strongest people in the world are those who can love someone deeply and walk beside them until they leave this earth, because it takes strength to lose somebody you love and to keep going, as all of Scott's family knows. The hardest part isn't over, it's just begun. The strongest people in this room today are right here. Then Tracy, it was obvious to everyone how much Scott adored you, and he was so lucky to have a woman like you by his side. You're going to carry his strength with you forever, and so will we.
For those of you who don't know me, I'm John Massey, or also known as Masshole by Scott, who gave me that wonderful nickname on Twitter. So yes, that would also make me one of Scott's Twitter friends. I look back and realize that we actually started following each other on Twitter 3 years ago this month. So I'm not a daddy blogger, and nor was at the time was a CrossFitter like many of Scott's followers. I actually started following Scott for his upbeat attitude and, quite frankly, his sense of humor, which I enjoyed. Through social media, I began to talk to Scott and Tracy and began sharing live with them every day. It was neat to just kind of general conversation, but every day getting to kind of know each other better. It was a short time later that I traveled to Atlanta to meet them in person for the first time. And after I met them, our friendship changed. Quickly over the next year, these two Twitter followers and their kids started to become more than just people I met off of Twitter. They were my friends. Last year, I had the privilege of sharing life with them more than just online. From our epic road trip from Georgia to Texas, going to an Atlanta Falcons game with Scott here in Texas, so they were against the Houston Texans, wearing a Falcons jersey, and I quickly found that there are no Falcons fans in Texas. To being with them at Clayster Care, who so graciously honored them as a family last year. To just the times that I got to visit and just be with their family. Somewhere along the way, Scott and Tracy and their family became more than just my friends. They started to become like family to me. So earlier this year, I decided to move to Texas to be closer to them. Yes, if you're doing the math, I moved 1,200 miles from the city where I was born and raised to be closer to people that I had just met 2.5 years prior. It's crazy, I know, but that should just tell you how much of an impact Scott had on my life. Looking back at the first few months here in Texas, I realize now that it was a gift to get to live with Scott, Tracy, the kids, and Scott's parents. Yes, all 9 of us under one roof. I'm not always sure they saw it that way. I always wondered, were they thinking, geez, Scott, thank you for inviting your Twitter friend to come live with us. Is he ever going to move out? Which, for the record, I did move out. It was a gift because I got to share just everyday life with Scott and see a side that many people didn't get a chance to see. And here's just a few things I want to share with you about that. Obviously, one of Scott's passions in life is CrossFit, as everyone has mentioned. One of my personal favorite memories of Scott in regards to CrossFit was just a random Saturday when Scott lied to me and told me we were going to the box to just lift. Which, after a few minutes of being there and lifting, he decided to come up with a wad in his head and says, oh, we're going to do something different. And I thought, well, so much for just lifting. We just did the jump rope portion that he decided to do, and I still struggle with jump roping today. And back then I was having trouble just passing the jump rope more than a couple times before I tripped and fall. And that day Scott looked at me and said, you're going to do 50 in a row. Then he proceeded to do 50 in a row without breaking a sweat. Go figure. So he hands me the rope, and as I struggle, Scott stood there and he continued to encourage me. I reached a point where I wanted to give up. I was so frustrated. He looked at me and he wouldn't let me. He said, you can do this. He continued to tell me over and over, you're going to this, you've got this, and just would cheer me on. Knowing Scott, sometimes I would think he could will me to run through a brick wall. And that day he did. With a lot of determination and on the brink of passing out, I finally managed to turn that rope 50 times without stopping. And when I was done, Scott and I celebrated my success. Through every other WOD I did with Scott, no matter what challenge he was facing physically, not only did he manage to always finish before me, but he also made sure to cheer me on until I finished or almost passed out on the floor. And after every crazy WOD, as we would walk back to the car to go home, he would always look at me and joke and say, just remember, it's better than dying. Getting to live with Scott and his parents, who I've come to call Nanny and Pawpaw, much like the children, I got to see where his personality came from. From the compassion that he had, that he and his parents shared for helping others, or maybe even the touch of stubbornness that I'm pretty sure he got from his mom. Love you, Nanny. It was touching to get to see Scott interact with his parents that he loves so much. Getting to watch Scott be daddy to his children was nothing short of amazing. Calling him a loving father doesn't begin to express what Scott's children meant to him. Sometimes at home I would just sit back and watch Scott interact with each of his children. Even the simplest moments were so beautiful to watch. And not only does Scott love his children, but it was very apparent his children very much love their daddy. Last, and certainly not least, I got to witness the love story of a lifetime. Getting to watch Scott and Tracy on a daily basis was so touching. Scott was crazy about her. Though he did love to play horrible jokes on her, and sometimes gave her the hardest time about the most random things, but I always just chalked that up to Scott being Scott. In everything that they did, it was apparent that they both loved each other more than anything else. In talking with his friends this last few weeks, it was obvious just how much he loved her and the kids. When each of us, and some of us not even connect to each other, when each of us would ask, Scott, is there anything I can do for you? He would always respond, take care of Tracy and the kids. Scott, you taught me so much in these 3 short years we knew each other. How to be a loving father someday, to never give up, to always have a positive attitude, to love others, what it means to be a devoted husband, and what it truly meant to be selfless. Thank you for being like the brother I never had.
Daddy was the best daddy ever in the whole wide world. He'll always be with me no matter what. He's always there in my heart. I'll never forget.
Got one more that wants to share something before I share just a few words. And Andrew Watson, another friend, wanted to share something and couldn't be here today. But he wanted to communicate this message out. It says this: I'm sorry I couldn't be there today and that I missed the Serene WOD this morning. Jerry, thanks for putting that together. I'll do it the first chance I get. I'll probably need to buy some new socks first though, so I can do it appropriately. Scott and I met as a direct result of his brain cancer. My wife and I help run a nonprofit called Place for Care that supports families dealing with cancer and other serious medical issues. A few months before our last event, Laura, one of our other coaches, told us about Scott and helped me get in contact with him after our board decided that we wanted to provide some support to the Serenes. Not long into our first conversation, a mutual stubbornness became very apparent, and it was clear that we'd either be great friends or not talk again. Fortunately, it was the former. Brain cancer may have initiated our friendship, but it never defined it. We talked about Place for Care, we talked about CrossFit, about being husbands and dads, and just giving this whole adult thing our best effort. We talked about our kids and how proud of them we were, and about our wives and how we were both fully aware that we had each married way out of our league. We met regularly at Mary's Tacos here in Bernie, one because of the tacos and also because of the layout. The dining area has several small rooms off to the side, each with one table, and it's a great place to meet and talk. My Bernie native wife found this to be rather amusing. Apparently, that building had previously been a tanning salon, and the little rooms we like to sit in were the private tanning bedrooms. So there were several comments made about Scott and I and our tanning booth. From our first conversation, Scott talked frequently of wanting to use his brain cancer for good, of wanting to do something bigger than himself, something that lasted. He so very clearly had the heart of a servant. He excitedly talked about helping at future Place for Care events. He talked about wanting to organize a CrossFit fundraising event to support brain cancer awareness, and out of that desire, he put together kettlebells for brain cells. It was never about him, but always about serving others. The only complaining I ever heard from Scott was that he didn't like Tracy having to take care of him because he never wanted to be a burden on her. He always wanted to serve, never expecting that he himself should be served. Scott lived out Romans 12:10, be devoted to one another in love, honor one another above yourselves. Well, he taught me into participating in the CrossFit Open this year and pushed and encouraged me to do more than I thought I was capable of. And he showed up all of us by completing the Open on his weekends off from chemo and radiation. Listen, Reebok, Rich Froning is all right, but if you want a truly impressive CrossFit athlete, Scott's your man. A month ago, I had the chance to work out with Scott, which I didn't get very often due to our differing opinions on how ridiculous it is to be at the box at 5:15 a.m. Now, that morning, I saw once again how strong and stubborn and determined my friend was as he fought to stay on his feet and complete the WOD. That afternoon, I sat with him in the ER in Bernie waiting. Apparently, I'm no help at the hospital, by the way. In 2 hours, all I managed to do was text Tracy a few times with zero useful information, make a couple of rubber glove balloons, and possibly frame Cameron for rubber glove theft. Allegedly. 10 minutes after Tracy got there, we were all in the parking lot, loading up to leave. She knows how to get things done. She knew how to take care of Scott. I love seeing them interact in the way that they loved each other. The Four C's may not realize the importance of it yet, but they have been blessed with a wonderful example of a loving marriage. Carson, Kane, Carly, and Cameron, your daddy was an amazing man. He loved your mama and each of you completely. He always thought of you first and wanted nothing more than to take care of his family. He fought as long and hard as he could with everything that he had to get every last minute with you. Boys, he showed you what it means to be a man. to put your family first, to love your wife and kids well, to serve others. And Carly, he set a very high bar for any man that wants to be a part of your life in the future. And Tracy, Carson, Kane, Carly, and Cameron, look around. This is a community united by Scott. It was a community that was loved and served by Scott, and that loved him. This is a community that will continue to love and support you. Scott Serene left an impact on all of us that were blessed with the honor of being his friends and family, an impact that will far outlive him. In Proverbs 27:17 says this, "Iron sharpens iron, and one man sharpens another. I don't know if I sharpened Scott, but he sharpened me. He sharpened all of us." I had the great honor of knowing Scott and to coach him at Hill Country CrossFit. The first time I saw him, he was kind of in the corner, and he was there well before class started, and he was pulling out of his bag of goodies some shin guards. And so I looked at the board, and there's box jumps. Apparently he had some bad experiences along the way. Maybe trying to jump on high boxes. But I knew that there was something about him. I knew that there was a little bit of hardcore to him. But after that, it became conversations about a workout, or we got to grab some coffee. He introduced me to this delicious brew called Chameleon Cold Brew. I introduced him to free coffee on Wednesday, first Wednesday of every month at Freedom Cup. So I thought it appropriate that we wear our coffee socks this afternoon because it was coffee time. Usually he had to be cut off at a certain point of coffee drinking because I think he'd probably drink it most of the day. We get to talk about family, we get to talk about our life, our past, general randomness, we talk frustrations. He was always genuinely interested and wanted to engage the individual. It was never about simply the transferring of information. For Scott, the conversation was always the experience of being with the individual right in front of him or those on social media. He loved people, and he especially loved his people. Last Thanksgiving, Scott made a list of the top, or not maybe the top, but a list of 10 things he was thankful for. And he writes it out and then says why. For Tracy, he says, "My rock." For the 4 C's, it's the reason for fighting. For family, it was the support. For friends, reminders of courage. For cancer, that it opened his eyes. Doctors, saving my life. Team Scott, members are family. CrossFit, body, mind, energy. Twitter, lifelong friends. Life, better than dying. CrossFit was a big part of Scott's life. And so if you haven't been yet, I'm sure you'll be on Monday morning after hearing about these great things, so we'll open that door for you. So when you walk in to Hill Country CrossFit, there's a whiteboard, appropriately called because it's white. It's a board that you write on. But there's this thing that happens when you walk into the gym, you see the workout that's written on the board, you begin discussing what it's possibly going to be like. You evaluate what weight you might throw on, debate whether you're going to charge hard after it or maybe pace it out a little bit, and you probably complain about whoever programmed it because they put in your weaknesses there. But then you actually have to do it. And you spend time evaluating before, but in the middle of it, it's often not what we anticipated. We make course corrections, we drop weight, or we just drop for a short amount of time. We realize maybe I was wrong a little bit in some areas. We get beat down, but we're encouraged. We look around the room and somebody else is going. This picturesque moment this past March as Scott continues to blow through one of the CrossFit workouts and just encouragement, people yelling across the room, "Come on, Scott, come on!" And that's a lot of what you got, not just from that side, but from Scott as well. And you end up on the floor exhausted and done. And in the end, to evaluate a little bit how you did, what part you actually did okay with, and most of us probably make some excuse as to why we slowed down at a certain point or what we could have done better but didn't. It's a shared experience of struggle laced with evaluation, victory, defeat, and encouragement with people around us. And I believe that tells us a little bit about the story of our lives. The evaluation is often where we find ourselves in settings like this, which makes sense. It's appropriate for us to look back and see what we've done different. But the place that so many of us know Scott, and the place where we're encouraged by Scott, was in the middle. The nuts and bolts of it, the hard blood, sweat, and tears portion of it. In the middle of the fight, this was Scott's attitude. It's something that he shared at Place for Care last year. It says, the only message I would have would be, in tough times, always have a positive attitude, and trying to stay pleasant is better than any medicine you can find. This is what drew so many to Scott. His optimistic attitude was a display of a hard hand dealt, but a desire to approach even that in the right way. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says this, the time is always right to do what's right. What does that look like for us? The Serenes have a sign in their house that says, live life to the fullest. I love that. And one of the best ways to do this is to know what we are and what we are not defined by. Scott knew very early on that the cancer did not define him. And I would add to that we're not defined by what has happened to you in the past, though that most certainly shapes you for better or for worse. Let's say this, you're more rightly defined by what your heart is most closely aligned with. And my encouragement and hope for us is that we would be defined by something that is much larger than ourselves. For Scott, an opportunity with kettlebells for brain cells came along, and his voice echoes in my head as he said, I want to do something that outlasts me and is bigger than just me. The notorious Dr. Seuss in the Lorax says this, unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. So the push towards doing something bigger than yourself is a hope. It's a hope for something different, a different way than how things are currently. But what is hope? Augustine, old theologian, says this, hope has two daughters, anger and courage. Anger at how things are, and courage to see they don't remain as they are. In the end, what is it that will last? Is there anything that is eternal? And I believe there is, and so my great hope is that we would know what is eternal, and our hearts would be more closely aligned with that above and beyond what is temporal. 1 Timothy 4:10 says this, this is why we work hard and continue to struggle, for our hope is in the living God, who is the Savior of all people, and particularly of all believers. Romans 5 says this, we throw open our doors to God and discover at the same moment that He has already thrown open His door to us. We find ourselves standing where we always hoped we might stand, out in wide open spaces of God's grace and glory, standing tall and shouting our praise. So this isn't the end. This life that everybody will breathe their last at some point, it's not the end. It's the upside down message of the gospel of Jesus, that He gave His life that we would have life. Life to the full now and in the life to come. That because of what Jesus has done on our behalf, we have life. This is grace. So this is what grace would look like for the 30 plus people that were there this morning. To you getting to a point where you know that you cannot go anymore. And for somebody to walk up to you and say, I'm going to finish this for you. I'm going to take a weight that you can't carry, and I'm going to take that on myself, and I'm going to finish. And you go, no. I don't want you to do that. And says, well, you can't do it on your own. Brother, I'm going to offer something and give you something, not because you earned it, not because your form is greater, because You're just a special God because of the love that I have for you. And they would do it over and over and over and over and over again, even if it cost them their life. Because for Jesus, doing that, giving his life, he was so much more concerned with restoring us back to God that he would give his life. And this, my friends, we receive in faith. Free gift, not earned because we beat the clock or made a certain score, but because of the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus, and us receiving this gift with open hands. Scott would get mad at me, not very often, but usually it revolved around me wanting to help him put his weights away. He thought I was giving him special favor because of his condition. I would tell him that, well, I help a lot of people put their weights away and that you're really not that special. But the truth is, I loved him. And the best way to demonstrate that in the moment was to serve him and give of myself in helping him and those around. And he understood that. He gave of himself. The truth is, it's just a tangible visual of grace given and grace received. That we will be humbled by what is offered and receive it as the loving, generous, grace and love-filled gift that it is. That we would receive with open hands the love of God found in Christ Jesus as he takes the junk of our life on himself. He pays the penalty and in exchange gives us an abundant life. A life to the full. And so may we, as we leave this place, may we love out of the overflow of his grace that has been given as we walk forward together. We pray. God, thank you for this time. A hard time, but a good time. A good time to reflect, share memories, to reflect on the changes that were produced within Scott, that were passed down, a legacy left by Scott. God, I pray that we would know your grace, and that we would receive with open hands, not because we've done anything, but because you've done everything, and we get to walk into that. May we love each other well moving forward. May we honor Scott that way. May we elevate and lift up your name that way to love each other well as we leave this place. And thank you for this time. Amen. Guys, thank you for being here. On behalf of the Serenes, thank you. We've got some refreshments outside. Feel free to hang out in the atrium as long as you'd like. I'd also love to draw your attention to the garage area. There's some places where you can write some notes, some cards, for the kids and for Tracy, and some rocks over there. So just mingle around, enjoy time, be present with one another, and enjoy the time that you have here. All right, you're dismissed. Thank you, guys.